Hello music fans, welcome to the Death by Unicorn channel, to another episode of What's New 2023, where I talk about new albums that came out in metal, rock, and prog over the past week or so. I listened to 11 albums that came out on September 1st, 2023, and I'll talk about them in my order of preference. But before I get to that, I want to mention two albums that came out on August 31st. The first one is by Nick D. Frenette. He's a friend of mine. He recommended I check it out, so I did, and I really enjoyed it. It's called Summer Songs, and these two albums that I'm mentioning from August 31st, they're not my typical genres. They're more like folk rock, even though I mostly focus on progressive rock, progressive metal, but these are pretty cool. This one from Nick very much has a summer theme, as you can tell from the name, Summer Songs. It's kind of folk rock with some pop and alternative influences in there. It's very different from his other release that he put out earlier this year, which is more of an outer space sounding concept album. I slightly prefer his previous one, but I do like both of his albums for this year. I always described his vocals as a mix of Jeff Martin from the Tea Party, Johnny Cash, and David Bowie, if you could imagine those three mixed together. Check this out if you want some nice summer sounding folk rock songs that sound with vocals that sound like that. And next up is a release from Haley Michelle called Songbirds. This is an EP, also kind of folk rock with country influences, and this is Nick's fiance, so they both released an album on the same day. They're a musical couple. Very cool to hear such a talented couple releasing new music. I enjoyed this as well. Stylistically, she sounds like a female version of Neil Young's country folk rock material. Very pleasant and relaxing music. Now back to the regularly scheduled program with more music that's in my wheelhouse, in my normal genres. My favorite album from September 1st was Aviations and their album Luminaria. This is progressive metal, and it's their third album. They're a band from the US. The opening track here, Prelude, is a perfect short, around 3-minute prelude track that builds suspense, gets you pumped up for what's to come. And when the lead vocals on the second track, Cradle, come in, they remind me a lot of Michael Lessard from The Contortionist. Even the drumming, keyboards, and guitars are reminiscent of The Contortionist, which is a band I really love, so I'm here for it on this release. The third track, Safe House, reminds me more of Periphery. And then the fourth track, Legend, is the heaviest on the album so far. Brings out some harsh vocals to contrast with the amazing melodic, emotional, and powerful clean vocals. The clean vocals also remind me a little bit of Casey Crescenzo from The Deer Hunter. And then the rest of the album is all killer, with the last track, Blink, being my current favorite. So if you like The Contortionist, Periphery, plus The Deer Hunter, check this out if the combination of those styles sounds good to you. This is immediately jumping up to my top 20 releases I've heard so far this year, right upon hearing it, and I look forward to digging into the rest of their catalog. Next up, my second favorite album that came out on September 1st is by Soen, and it's called Memorial. This is progressive metal, kind of leaning more towards the rock side, not so much metal anymore, not as much metal as they used to have in their sound. It's the sixth album by this Swedish band. For fans of Opeth and Tool, but again with a little bit more accessibility and kind of radio hooks. The single Unbreakable is great as usual with these guys. The album leans a little bit to the catchy side. The accessible side focuses heavily on melody and traditional song structures, so it's less progressive than what they usually do and what they've done in the past. They've kind of ditched some of the unusual song structures and a lot of the odd time stuff. There might be the odd weird time signature thing or time signature change here, but it's all very traditional, straightforward, probably a lot more 4/4 than they usually do, and kind of keeping it simple. The vocals, though, are just amazingly performed. The hooks are just catchy as hell. I saw a review from another YouTuber I watch frequently called Rhyme Signatures. I agree with his point of view on this album. I was hoping for something a bit less safe and more progressive. But this is still very solid and enjoyable, and I do want to listen to it more. It is probably the weakest Soen album, in my opinion. Maybe the second weakest. It's near the bottom of their catalog out of their 6 albums, but everything they do is great, so I still enjoy it. They're just an excellent band. Next up is Empire State Bastard and their album Rivers of Heresy. This is kind of progressive metal, but it's got a lot of like hardcore, grindcore, sludge, and thrash metal influences. And it's the debut album by this kind of a super group founded by 2 members of the band Biffy Clyro, and they got Dave Lombardo from Slayer on drums, and he's always a beast on drums. He's great. This album is very intense, brutal, and weird at the same time. I definitely need to listen to it more to see if this could crack my top 100 albums of the year. I think it's a contender for that for me. I know for sure I'm going to have Aviations in my top 100 of the year, and probably Soen, and then this one might crack that as well. It kind of depends. This could be one that grows on me the more I listen to it, or it could be one that grates on me and irritates me more over time, so I'm not sure yet. But the musicianship, creativity, and performances here are stellar. Next up, I want to mention an EP by Toehider called Snapshots from Beacontown Spring Dance 85. This is pop rock, and the title of the EP is kind of what it sounds like. It sounds like pretty poppy and danceable. It's the second EP from this year from Toehider, the one-man band project led by the amazing Michael Mills. As with everything he does, it's very well done. His vocals have Freddie Mercury level power to them. His arrangements and harmonies rival Queen, but he has even more versatility than Queen. If you check out his whole discography, you'll see what I mean, and how he can jump from so many different genres. I still wish he was spending his time on a full-length album follow-up to his great album he put out in 2022, but I'm still happy to hear all the EPs that he's putting out instead. Next up is Randy George and his album Beyond Worlds. This is progressive rock with acoustic and jazz fusion influences. It's the 3rd solo album by this American musician, best known for playing bass in the Neil Morse Band. Most of the album's instrumental, but some songs have vocals. There's some guest musicians here, including Neil Morse, who does additional keyboards on Technical Difficulties, which is the name of the song he's on. And then Eric Gillette, also from the Neil Morse Band. He does guitar solos on Pool Toad Redemption and Make Me Real. Those guys are amazing players as always. The bass playing from Randy is also amazing. It sounds like he uses a fretless bass on one of the tracks. I always like to hear that. There's a lot of jazz fusion stuff on here. There's a saxophone on The Good World. Check this out if all that sounds appealing to you. Next up is Timechild and their album Blossom and Plague. This is more on the hard rock side with some heavy metal and progressive influences. It's the second album by this Danish band. The vocals are a bit grungy. They remind me of Chris Cornell from Soundgarden, plus Alice in Chains, which is not a bad thing at all, as those are some great vocalists there. Fans of that vocal style who want to hear some music with some cool guitar leads and some odd time signature changes should check this out. It's almost like a progressive grunge album, maybe for fans of Alter Bridge as well. Check this out if that sounds appealing to you. Next up is Escape the Fate and their album Out of the Shadows. This is post-hardcore with hard rock, metalcore, and pop influences. It's the 8th album by this American band, and I think this is their best album since their second album. I really like their first 2 albums, but after their second album, This War Is Ours, the quality of their output really went down the drain, and they released nothing but kind of annoying, boring crap. But this one has a little bit more interesting stuff than what they have been doing since then. It does still have a bit more pop influence than I want. It's got some like trap beats and stuff like that, but it also has some really interesting composition, that more interesting than they've had in a while. really good guitar riffs, good clean vocal melodies, but also some punishing screen breakdowns as well. Check this out if you want to hear a little bit of Escape the Fate Redemption. And next up I want to talk about Rhys Marsh and their album Towards the West. This is progressive rock. It's a solo album by this Norwegian prog rocker. And it's hard to tell how many albums he's done. Prog Archives and Discogs have 7 before this. So maybe this is his 8th, but I saw somewhere saying that he had 10 already. His albums are a mix of solo albums and albums where he's the band leader for a project called Rhys Marsh and the Autumn Ghost. So that might be why it's hard to count. This is a proggy album, but it's not too proggy. A lot of it is closer to singer-songwriter music. It's all very pleasant, not super dangerous or boundary pushing, pretty pleasant stuff that you could kind of put on around normal people and they wouldn't think it's too out there. But it's catchy, well done, well played, good stuff. And next up is Repentance and their album The Process of Human Demise. This is melodic metalcore with groove metal influences. It's the second album by this American band. I first heard the single Withered and Decayed. It's groovy, it's catchy. The verses groove with heavy riffs and screaming for fans of Lamb of God. Then the chorus of that song has a catchy hook for fans of Bullet for My Valentine. If you hear the single, I think you'll get the gist of what the whole album sounds like. So if you like that, check out the album. If not, skip it. And next up is Polaris and their album Fatalism. This is another metalcore album, fairly melodic as well. It's the third album by this Australian band. I heard the single Inhumane. It had great guitar riffs and energy, so I added it to my list to listen to. The whole album was well done, but pretty typical sounding melodic metalcore, nothing too special here. And last album that I'm going to mention on my video today is by Silent Skies, and it's called Construct. And this is kind of like piano-driven soft rock. It's like ambient, artsy rock, but it's got some alternative indie and pop influences thrown in there. It's the third album by this Swedish band. It features Vikram Shankar on keyboards and Tom England of Evergrey and Redemption on vocals. He's a great vocalist. I kind of think of him as Michael Bolton of progressive power metal, but on here he's not singing progressive metal, he's not singing power metal, he's singing softer poppy ambient art rock songs that sound like 80s piano power ballads. Something about this album, it almost sounds like Christian rock to me. I'm not sure if it is, but it's beautiful music with great vocals, but it's very one note the whole time, and it's all just somber piano ballads that are sad sounding. They do a cover of Linkin Park's Numb on here, which is an interesting bonus track. If you want to hear a bunch of sad piano ballads sung by Thomas England, then check this out. He is a really good singer. I think it's worth a listen through once, but I probably won't return to it much because it's not the kind of sonic adventure that I really want to go on again. But I enjoyed it while I was on, and it's all very well sung, very well performed. And that's it for my video today of new albums that came out over the past week in metal, rock, and prog. Let me know if I missed anything great down in the comments. Let me know what you think of these albums that I mentioned as well. And until next time, peace out.